All right. So again, welcome everyone. We really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. We are going to move kind of quickly. We do have a lot to cover. So glad that you are with us. And first, we're going to hit a couple of important updates, and then we will dig right into the special ed profile indicator process. Okay. So by way of update, we want to remind you, Helen and I have 4 sessions of our special ed office hours left this year. The next one is on February 1st. It's an afternoon session. And so we want you to remember to register for that. We also want to remind you to please, if you're able to, send any questions ahead of time through email. And we have had a few directors who have polled their staff before our sessions and asked if there's anything that they need clarification on, which has been really helpful. We can do that, and then you can take that information back to your staff. I have dropped the link to register for the next office hours into the chat, so take advantage of that this morning. Thanks, Rachel. Another quick update. We had a lot of requests to have some content around prior written notice, when to give it, what to write in each section. So we have responded to that. And in our Beyond Compliance IEP and ETR series that are for both school age and early childhood, you will now see an additional module in each of those 4 courses talking specifically about prior written notice. We also have available in our Canvas catalog a 1-hour session for District Rep 101. And that would be really helpful for your building principals and anyone else in your district who may be sitting in on ETR or IEP meetings, especially if you're not there. So it just gives them the background for what they should be looking for, and especially if they're going to be signing off or making any decisions on behalf of your district.
Good morning. We wanted to share that House Bill 554 has gone through the Senate and the House. It was signed by the governor on December 14th, and this will raise the age of the category of developmentally delayed from 6 all the way through 9. This will go into effect 90 days after that was signed on December 14th. And when we have that actual official date, we will share that immediately. We know this has impact for preschool children that are going to be transitioning to kindergarten. So as soon as we have any more information, we will share that. But we wanted you all to be aware of that change because that's something that many have been lobbying for a long time.
All right, good morning, everybody. Just in reference to that past slide, as a former preschool psychologist, anyone who is both overjoyed and terrified at that last update, it will be okay, but this is good news. I'm here to just remind everybody about the Horn Walter Award nominations. Anyone who has been in our region for a long time, this is a very familiar process, and our process is not changing. The last few years, we have not had any kind of regional event or celebration. And I think that's going to continue. We know a lot of districts have really integrated this into their own local awards and honor ceremonies. And we really encourage that just from a spirit of inclusivity. So we're going to kind of keep doing the way we've done it. We don't know yet whether the coalition is going to be hosting a statewide event. They're actually polling folks right now to figure out what they want to do. But in terms of the nomination process, this will all kind of flow the same as it has before. And so if we can advance to the next slide. Just a couple of reminders for everybody. Again, this is the same process that we've had for the last 2 years. We do ask that districts nominate no more than, and I'm trying to move windows as I say this, 3 students and 1 educator, just to kind of keep it equitable. And we do ask that this flow through each district's student services or special education people services director, meaning if you're eliciting nominations from the buildings, that the person who actually submits them is the director of student services. So that way that person can can kind of keep it to that 3 students, 1 educator or educator team. The link that you see here, and I will drop it in the chat shortly, unless one of my colleagues beats me to it, is a link to all of the nomination materials. We do everything through Google. It has been very effective. And so that link right there will describe the entire process, the due dates, and then give you access to all the forms and the folders to upload. If you have any questions about this process, you can contact either myself or Maureen Casiopo. That is it for me.
All right, everybody. So I know we are here today to talk about the special education profile, the indicator review process, and a lot of new updates, not only to phase 1 of the special education profile, but some of the forms, the due dates, some signatures that are required that weren't before. So we are going to dive in. We are going to move very quickly through all of this information, but you will get the slides out afterwards. That usually Dee Dee sends the recording so that you'll be able to go back and look at some things. All right, today's agenda, we are going to go over, like I said, some new aspects of the phase 1 indicators. And then we are also going to talk a little bit about the timeline, some of your due dates that you have, the investigation of records, completing the self-review summary report. There is a little bit of an updated format for that. So that's something that we just wanted to show you as well. And then we also have some new tips on completing the improvement plan that has been adjusted a little bit too. And like I said, there are some new requirements on who needs to sign those improvement plans. And then finally, we will wrap up our session today with who are your points of contact at SST8 and our availability for scheduling some support to help you through this process. There has been some shifting this year, so who you might have worked with in the past at SST8 might be different than who you are working with now. Just an important reminder, like we said, this session is being recorded. It'll be able to access it later. We will send it out via email, and it will also be on our YouTube channel, along with many other videos that we have about helpful hints and tips for the submission process. One thing that we did want to announce is that January 17th, next week, we will be holding an optional office hours, a Q&A from 12 o'clock to 1:30. That's virtual via Zoom. And the registration link is on your screen. That is a time when you can come join us virtually. We will have all of our special education consultants available so that you can ask very specific questions about your profile, about indicators. Today, we are trying to hold questions until the end if possible, because we have so much material to get through. And today we will answer some general questions, something that's more broad and kind of pertains to everybody. But if you have a very specific question about your specific district, your community school, your profile, some of your data, that's something that you might want to utilize our Q&A next week for and register, or you could email us directly. So we just want to put that out there that is another support that we'll be offering. Now, in terms of accessing your data, I've had some emails and so have other consultants Friday and today. The profile was just released on January 5th. So we know it's quite new to everybody. And so right now we just encourage you, if you are able to go into your OHID portal and open up your special education profile, if you have access to it, and kind of follow along with us, that would be very helpful so that you can kind of see some of the things that we're pointing out. And so we'll just give you kind of a couple seconds here to log into your OHID portal. If you're not quite sure how to get into your OHID portal and find your special education profile, you would log into OHID and you would find it under My Apps. And then it'll look like this here in the center of the screen, Special Education Profiles and Ratings. I have mine starred so that it pops up immediately on my front page when I open it. And then you would click Open App. And then the next page where this arrow is showing, it'll have a drop-down menu, and that's where you can find your school district or your community school. When that screen opens up, you'll see the 2022-2023 Special Education Profile. You would want to click on that. And then the next page that opens has a nice description here about what's different on this year's profile. And then also you'll see view 2022-2023 profile that you would click on in order to be able to get into your actual data. Now, another common question we get is, how do I know if I have a required action? If we have some type of indicator finding, how do I know that that's happening? Because you will see on your profile that you either met, did not meet something, it's not counted, it's not reported, or it's to be determined. So there will be different colors and it's all color coded. So as this arrow shows, you will see a not met sign, and it'll have this little caution symbol. And so that lets you know that you need to click the more information button and expand that tab. And then it will open up and it will show you all of your data. It'll show you your required actions that you need to take, your timelines, your due dates, the forms that you need. And so that is something that we just wanted to point out, because sometimes it gets confusing, because sometimes it'll be red and say not met, but it won't have this little caution symbol. That means there's no required action at this time. You just did not meet the indicator. Sometimes you need consecutive years in order to have required actions. But if you scroll through your profile, and I encourage you to really scroll through it slowly, and look for this caution symbol, because this will tell you if you have required actions. Janine, was there anything that you wanted to point out on this part particularly?
You've explained it beautifully, but part of the reason we wanted everyone to actually open their own profile today is because in a handful of cases, folks have had indicator 1 and 2 findings, which are new, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But because we're not used to indicators 1 and 2 having required corrective action, sometimes people's eyes are skimming over that and not noticing that now there is that triangle exclamation caution indicator. They're used to seeing it be red for not met, but they're not used to that meaning they have a finding. And so they're kind of like, hey, I only have this one finding for indicator 11. Whoops, no, there's more there. And that's happened a handful of times. So we'd like you right now, if you have your profile open, to go back and look specifically at indicators 1 and 2 and see if you have a finding. There are about 17 LEAs in our region that have one. And the reason is because in a few minutes, we're going to talk very specifically about our plan for support. It's different than the usual. And we want to make sure that you hear that, knowing whether you're included in that or not. Thanks, Rachel.
No, thank you, Janine. I appreciate it. All right, moving on. So we want to really share some information about some of the new phase 1 releases. Like we said, there are some new indicators, and Janine was just mentioning them. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail. But first, the special education profile is created annually for each school district and community school within our region. And it gives you a nice snapshot of kind of where you're at right now with special education and with some key indicators for your students with disabilities, and how some of your processes are functioning and some of your systems, and whether or not you're meeting some of those thresholds that are set forth by the state of Ohio. And your special education profile, usually phase 1 comes out in December. This year it came out a little bit later. It just came out last week on January 5th. And then phase 2 of the profile usually comes out in April or May. Now, phase 1 of the indicator profile, there are required actions. Phase 2, there are typically not required actions. But phase 1 does notify each district or community school of any required activities that you may have for any non-compliance findings. So the profile is really centered around some of these essential questions that you see on the left-hand side about students entering kindergarten ready to learn. Students, are they achieving at the appropriate levels that we would expect them to be at? What are their post-secondary outcomes? Are they graduating on time? Are we completing timely initial evaluations? Are we making sure that they're receiving equitable services and support? Which gets into disproportionality. So as you can see, the indicators are kind of grouped based upon these essential questions. And if anybody's following our SST8 podcast, our special education podcast season that we just started releasing this January, is focusing on the essential questions and some of the indicators. So that might be something for you to kind of dig into a little bit with our podcast, if you want to share it with other people in your district who are maybe not as familiar about indicators and the special education profile and these essential questions. Like I was saying, we have phase 1 of the profile and then phase 2, and I've highlighted some new changes that have happened this year. So phase 1, we have our usual in the white kind of section. You see our typical indicators that we usually have: alternate assessment, evaluation timelines, post-secondary outcomes, transition, disproportionality, and then some things that are not being released right now in phase 1 is indicator 4, which looks at discipline. And that's because of the pandemic. We're still kind of recovering and taking some data and collecting that information. So you will see in phase 1, indicator 4, and phase 2, indicator 3, math and reading proficiency, there are no required actions currently at this time for those indicators. Next year, you can anticipate that there may be some required actions at that point, because then we will be a couple years away from the school closure and COVID-19 occurring. 2 new things for phase 1 this year, which are extremely important, we want to really draw your attention to. Phase 1 is now releasing indicator 1 graduation and indicator 2 dropout. That is something brand new that has not been released in phase 1 before. And now there are required actions. If you find in your special education profile a not met sign next to indicator 1 and 2 and a caution symbol, that is telling you to open up that more information tab, because there are now required actions. For indicator 1 and 2 noncompliance, you will now need to create a self-review summary report and an improvement plan and have those submitted to the state. And you will also need to have some of our involvement in that process as well for certain districts. And so that is something we really want to draw your attention to, because some people have been kind of skimming over that in their profile and not realizing that that's there. But we do have required actions. And like Janine just said, we have probably about 17 or 18 districts or community schools in Region 8 alone who now have to do some type of required action for indicator 1 and 2. So again, like I was saying, phase 1 release, the graduation and dropout indicators, you will have to do an SRSR self-review summary report and an improvement plan. And then in September, you will have to upload evidence and proof showing that you are making strides towards some of the things that you noted on your improvement plan that you were going to do to address these indicators and the noncompliance that was found. We also have for disproportionality, and I'm going to let Janine talk a little bit about this too, but we also have some new at-risk designations for DisPro, looking specifically this year at 9 and 10. So you'll want to make sure that you check all of your disproportionality indicators, even if it is not flagged as having any required actions. Even if you have a green symbol that says you met that indicator for disproportionality, you will want to still open it up and look at the more information and look at your data trends, because some districts, and I'm not going to pick on any district, but I did pull this from somebody's district last night, that they met the indicator, so they don't have any actions required this year. However, if they take a look at their data, they see that SLD for students who are Black is trending upwards. So that means that they were 1 year kind of at a caution sign, and then the past 2 years, they have hit the threshold and they are in the red. So if this year, this upcoming school year, when they get their profile in December, they are also red again, they will have a required action now in disproportionality. And so the state wanted to kind of, draw people's attention to this new at-risk designation for DisPro, because we didn't want any surprises. We didn't want people to go a couple of years and all of a sudden say, oh my gosh, we had no idea that we were going to have a non-compliance finding and disproportionality. But if you take a look at your data, you will see that you had the opportunity for a couple of years to see that you were trending upwards towards that 2.5 threshold that we have here in Ohio. So Janine, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about that? Because I know that's been a surprise for some people in the past.
I know in terms of the at-risk, you've covered it beautifully. My mantra has always been to fully unpack your DisPro data, and you've explained that. I do apologize. My text is blowing up from a couple people who are texting me with questions offline. If you're hearing this and you haven't texted me yet, sit tight, we'll ask questions, but I'm going to help the people who've texted me so far. Rachel, did you address the part about calculations that don't rise to the level of significant DisPro that are below the number being added for the first time?
No, I'm leaving that for you, Janine.
Oh, because it's confusing and tricky. Yeah. So this is just basically because, and for those of you who joined us last year in person at the end of the year for forum, I won't name the district, but if you're there, you remember a district shared with us their journey of being surprised that they had disproportionality with a particular subgroup and a particular disability category because it had never even shown up in their calculations before. And that was because previously they didn't have enough students for that calculation to be done. I will spare you the calculation, especially just verbally, but just know that if you have a very small group of, say, multiracial students eligible for emotional disturbance, ODE doesn't calculate that and determine significant disproportionality. But the problem is sometimes you can be one away from crossing the threshold to having enough, and you can have massive disproportionality, but you don't know it because it's not being reported. So we really encourage everybody to unpack their dispro this year because all of the calculations are in there. Now, they won't hold those against you if there's disproportionality for a group that's too small to calculate, but it's a way to warn folks, hey, this group is small, but there's a lot of disproportionality. If you get a few more students of that racial group enrolled, you may all of a sudden have dispro. So I know that's a little confusing. Basically, go into your dispro section and click every plus sign you see, and that's the best way to look at it. So if you have any questions about that, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to explain more. But really, again, just an encouragement to unpack that data as much as possible.
Some changes to indicator 14 post-school outcomes. In the past, we had the OLTS, the Ohio Longitudinal Transition Survey, where there were cohorts, and every 5 years or so, it was time for your district to follow up with students and do surveys as they were exiting high school and graduating, what they were going to be doing after high school, and then following up a year later, and then sending that information on to the state. Well, now there will no longer be cohorts for the OLTS, as it will not be used. Now, there will be post-school outcomes. There will be an exiting student follow-up record that will be required by all districts and community schools serving high school students to collect that post-school data from all their students with special education classification who are graduating the previous spring. So each year you can start to expect that you will be gathering some of this data about your students who have graduated the previous year and then submitting that information to the state. So that is something that we just wanted to bring to your attention that you were aware of. So in your profile this year, under indicator 14, you will see TBD, to be determined, and it's usually orange, I believe, in your profile. But if you click it open, there will also be a link to the EMIS manual. But there's more information that will be forthcoming about this. It is not something that we have all the details yet because this has been a big change. And so this is something that just to keep in mind, that you will have to probably be doing some surveying at the end of the year. And some of that information comes from the state and some of it comes from some other areas. So just wanted to mention that as something to keep in mind. Like we said, it's a TBD at this point. We don't have a ton of information on it, but we will continue to provide you and forward you any information as we go forward.
Rachel, I just want to make sure you saw the question in the chat from Stephanie Morgan, and this may be something that we turn over to Helen. It says, can you confirm that all students as used in the language on this slide really means all students with disabilities and not all students?
No, it means, this is Helen, all students will be collecting, there will be, EMIS will pull all exiting seniors, not just students with disabilities, and this will be every year with a follow-up. So we still have to meet indicator 14, and that will be pulled from that information, but it's not going to be done the way it has been done in the past. And I think I've talked to several people, and people that were in the last cohort should have received a letter from the state, from maybe Samansky, explaining exactly where you stand. But yes, this we will, the state will be collecting exit information on all students.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks.
And thank you, Janine, for letting me know when there's things in the chat. All right. Now, some required actions and timelines. Just want to go into this quickly. So we have listed here in the bit.ly, if you have opened the bit.ly and you're in it, you will have access to all the manuals. I included the full manual for all indicators. And then there are also individual manuals, which is kind of nice. If you only have 1 or 2 findings and you just want to focus on those, you can have separate manuals for those indicator findings here. And you can click the link and you should be able to get into it. Manuals can also be found in your special education profile. So when you click open, if you have a non-compliance finding in graduation and you click it open on more information tab and you scroll down, you should be able to find the linked manual, the same one that I have here for indicators 1 and 2 graduation and dropout. So we really encourage you to download these, put them on your desktop, your laptop, or just have them for easy access, print them out, because it lists out in the manual step by step what you need to do for your non-compliance finding, the dates, the timelines, the forms, where you upload and submit everything. So the manuals are really nice and reader friendly in a lot of ways because they have a lot of tables and it's step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's what you need to do. This is also listed in your special education profile as well. So you have multiple areas of where you can kind of look to see what you need to do for your non-compliance finding. Some common required actions. So if you feel after looking at your data and any indicators that are non-compliant that there is a data reporting error, that is something that you would submit information to the state with your evidence and proof showing that you feel that that non-compliance finding is a data reporting error. And so that is something that we will talk about, the due date for that coming up. We also have the investigation of records. And this is when the state and the monitors would like to have records such as ETRs, IEPs, transition plans, and they take a look at them to see for non-compliance and certain indicators. We also talk a lot about the self-review summary report. We also call it the SRSR because it's such a long name. But if you have an indicator finding with non-compliance, you will be required by the state to complete a self-review summary report. And this really outlines some of your processes within your district. There's questions to answer, some data you have to provide and analyze, determine what are some priorities, what are some root causes, and then that helps drive your improvement plan that you're also required to complete and submit to the state. The improvement plan really follows your SRSR based on what you've identified as what led to your non-compliance finding and what are some root causes of that, what are some activities you need to implement and improve and complete, and that's what you would put on your improvement plan. Sometimes when they pull records at the state level and you submit them to them, they will ask you to correct evaluations. And so those will be sent back to you with feedback as to what was the error with those evaluations, how you need to correct them, and then you will submit those corrections by May, and we'll give you all those due dates. In September, if you submitted your SRSR and your improvement plan in September, you will need to show and submit evidence to the state and upload it through the OHID portal that you are making improvements, you are doing the activities you said you were going to do as part of your improvement plan, and you would submit all that information in September. And then for disproportionality only, there is a redirection of funds. So you have to redirect 15% of your IDEA funding if you have a finding in the area of disproportionality. And there's a lot of information in your profile about some financial contacts at the state and how to go about that and get more information about the redirection of the funding. But that's for just disproportionality.
Rachel, we have a great question in the chat
Okay.
asking if you complete a data reporting error appeal, will the SRSR and improvement plan still be required?
So it depends. And I'm going to also let Janine answer this one as well, because she's had more years doing this than I have. If you submit a data reporting appeal and they deny it, then you are still required to complete the SRSR and the improvement plan. And I would say submit that data error as soon as humanly possible, because it can take them quite a bit of time to kind of comb through that data that you send to them and your evidence and proof. And then you also might find yourself getting denied that data appeal, and then you still have to complete your SRSR and your improvement plan by the due dates. Janine, did you want to mention anything in there about some of that?
Yes, and I'm talking very slowly because I'm pulling up Michelle's specific finding, which I will not say. But there is also a section on some, if not all, of the self-review summary reports for if it is a data reporting error, meaning you either have two problems. One is the data are revealing an actual systemic programming problem, or the data was reported wrong. Either way, it's a problem. And so if you do not have the actual finding, it was a data reporting error, you still have to do a self-review summary report in many cases. And I believe this indicator is one, talking about what was the root cause of the data reporting error, and then what are you going to do about it? So it's going to lead to a different course of action than if you had that finding, but you still have to do that. So go ahead and open up your self-review summary report within your finding and take a look, but I'm pretty sure you would have to do that even if you had a data reporting error.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. I know that's definitely listed on the SRSR, and they definitely want to see, you know, what are you going to do to change that data reporting error? You might not have to complete everything, but there might be some things you do have to complete. But there are some things which we have seen in the past where there are data reporting errors. And the state does say, yes, you know, there was some type of error in the miscalculation, you know, on our end, you know, you're good. So if you feel like you do have a data reporting error, get that information submitted as soon as possible. As you can see the due dates on the screen, we like to make sure that you guys are aware of all of the due dates coming up. We already had one on January 6th, which was last week. That was just for indicators 9 and 10. So if you had disproportionality in identification for indicators 9 and 10, you had to submit some records and some information to the state. Also, if you had a data reporting error, you had to submit that as well. The next due date is February 10th for any of the indicators where you feel you have a data reporting error, or you are required to submit records as well. And it will tell you in your profile whether or not you need to submit records. It'll tell you what kinds of records. It'll tell you what pages from the ETRs, the IEPs, the transition plans, what you need to exactly submit for those student records. So that's the next due date coming up, February 10th. But like I said, get stuff set in as fast as possible, because everybody in the whole state is sending stuff in to the monitors. And so you want to make sure that you get your stuff in as quick as you can so that you can get your information back. Now, the big due date here, March 31st, 2023. It's going to come faster than you think. The self-review summary report, the SRSR, and the improvement plan for all indicators where there's a non-compliance finding, that is the due date for the state. That is when you need to send in your self-review summary report and your improvement plan, and you need to upload it, and you need to send it in the OHID portal. And there's different places to send different things. So you need to make sure you're looking at your manual and you're looking at your special education profile as to where to send these things. This date is non-negotiable. March 31st is something that you really put it in your calendar now. I already put it in all of our calendars as a reminder for ourselves, because I know there's spring breaks that take place in March and things like that. So March 1st is when you have to have all that information completed, everything signed, and everything ready to be submitted to the state. Now, you could submit it earlier than that. That would be fantastic. But March 31st is the deadline. Now, May 12th is another deadline. This would be for indicators where maybe you submitted records during the investigation of records, and they came back and said, hey, you have some records that you submitted to us that have some non-compliance in them. You need to fix these ETRs or these IEPs. Then you would submit those by May 12th. And then, like I said, in September, towards the end of it, which they've pushed a little bit further out, which is helpful for a lot of districts. It used to be a lot earlier. Now, at the end of September, September 29th is when you need to submit information to the state and upload it in your OHID portal about what kinds of progress you've made on the activities that you had listed in your improvement plan. They don't expect to have everything completed, but there will be the need to show that you are making gains and progress towards that systemic improvement. So this is a nice snapshot of kind of what those due dates are, but it's also listed in the manual. It's also listed in your profile. Located in the manual, like I said, they have this nice little table for you at the end of each section of the indicator, where on the left-hand side, it talks about the due date. In the middle, it talks about what you need to submit. And then on the right-hand side, it says, where do you submit? There are 3 different locations that you have to submit materials. Sometimes it is an email address. Other times it is a secure document upload site, which is usually for student records because it's confidential information. And then the self-review summary report and an improvement plan. And usually the evidence of completion of activities goes into the monitoring app in the OHID portal, and you would upload information there. So it's really important to have these tables handy for you to be able to see, where do I submit things, what do I submit, and when do I submit it by. Investigation of records. So something that's a little bit new this year for disproportionality, LEAs who are found non-compliant with indicators 9 and 10 had to submit records for each disability category that they were flagged for. So this is something that we just wanted to bring to your attention. This should already have been done on January 6th. Records are only needed for new racial areas identified. So that is something that if you have more questions about, please make sure that you talk to us a little bit. You can reach out to us at SST8 and we'll let you know who your contact is. Again, we've talked about this in the past, investigation of records for indicators 4, 9, 10, and 13. Like we said, you would submit student records, you would complete the record submission form, you would compile the required items that they're asking for, specific pages of the ETR and the IEP, and then you would label those records accordingly, and then you would submit them to the secure upload site. On our YouTube channel, we also have a video that we just created and updated about tips, hints, tricks on a successful record submission. You can find that video. It's only about 15 minutes on our YouTube channel, and it's updated for this year. Again, here are some due dates. Indicators 9 and 10 had records due last week. If you did not get it done ASAP this week. Indicators 13 and DisPro for placement, investigation of records, if it is required, February 10th is your next due date. Now, I know some people with DisPro placement do not have to send in records this time. You make sure you are looking at your profile very closely because they will tell you whether or not you need to submit records. The self-review summary report and just some updates on the SRSR. Again, that self-review summary report is a process where you pull a team together, you review the questions that are on it, and you look at your systemic processes, you gather some data and outline it on your SRSR. You determine if that area is a concern, whether or not you need to do a root cause analysis as a team, and then you would priority rank each area of concern. Some changes to the SRSR forms this year. They made them a little bit easier to fill out. I know it's still not everybody's preferred method, but it is, some of the boxes are a little bit different. So on the left-hand side of your SRSR form, you would have different topics, and then there would be all these questions that you would have to fill in and answer. And then you would do some data analysis over in this section, kind of hone in on what could be contributing to those areas of weakness. You would identify as that area of concern, yes or no, in the screen section. In the root cause section, this is where you would do a root cause analysis to determine, what is leading to that. It's kind of like when we have a behavior that we see and we're looking at the function of the behavior, what is causing that behavior to occur? And then you would prioritize. One would be the highest priority rank. And then this leads directly into your improvement plan as to what are the things that you've identified and summarized as part of your SRSR, what has been the data analysis you've done, what is the root cause, and then how have you linked that as a priority area.
Hey, Rachel, I don't want to throw you off, but I just want to address something in the chat really quickly. So keep thinking about self-review summary report and root cause. But if you were just listening to us talk about upload due date for records for disproportionality, and you heard us say January 6th, Serena just said ours says January 13th clearly. Yes, it does. Thank you for telling us that. We were told pretty clearly that they weren't going to change the due date. Obviously they did, and that's to your all's benefit. So we're glad to hear that you have a little bit extra time to get that upload completed. If you heard us say January 6th is when your records are due for that DisPro record upload, you got an extra week. Thank you so much, Serena. All right. Sorry about
Serena,
that.
no, that's okay. Thank you so much, Serena, because we were going based off the manuals that they shared with us in December when we were putting all of this together. And I'm glad to see that since we were waiting for the phase 1 report to come out in December, which would have led to that January 6th deadline. But since they changed and just released it on January 5th, they must have changed the due date to January 13th. And I was unaware of that. So thank you so much for pointing that out, and we'll make sure that we update that on the slides. Like I said, March 31st is the due date for the SRSR improvement plan. And like I said, it's important to remember that there's a lot of districts and there's a lot of ESCs and schools that are on spring break right around that time. This due date, this does not matter. This is a non-negotiable due date. Documents are still due by March 31st. So you will want to plan accordingly because there may be some teams that you can't get together. There may be some people you can't reach. I know last year, the due date was April 1st. And I had people emailing me 9 p.m. the night before saying, Rachel, can you sign my plan and send it back to me? So please make sure that you plan accordingly with these things. Updates to the improvement plan. So there are 4 different types of improvement plans. There is the results improvement plan, which is for a graduation dropout and alternate assessment. So indicators 1, 2, and 3C. So you will see on the improvement plan, you have to summarize your self-review summary report, do a little bit of reflection. If you had a plan in the past, you have to create a long-term goal, a short-term goal, and then outline different activities that you're going to be doing as part of addressing that non-compliance. And then there's a signature section. So on your improvement plan, you need to get certain kinds of signatures from different people within your district, from us, as well as possibly from your school sponsor if you're a community school. So when it comes to the improvement plan, SST is required to sign off on your improvement plan and before you submit it to the state. So that's something that you're going to want to make sure that you know who your point of contact is here at SST8 as to who will be reviewing your SRSR, your improvement plans, and signing off on them for you. Disproportionality has a little bit of a different improvement plan. They did change it a little bit this year. Still a lot of the same things with summary, reflection, goals, and activities. But because you have to redirect funding, this is an area you are wanting to make sure you check yes and no, depending on the activity, whether or not you are going to redirect part of that 15% of that funding to that activity or that training or whatever you're going to be engaging in. And they also did some new boxes on this one as well, kind of like a budget narrative and the target population and kind of helping you identify what information, what kinds of things are you going to be purchasing, programs, services, trainings, what will you be doing with your staff, and how will you be using some of those funds and some of those activities in order to show better compliance in DisPro. For indicators 11 and 13, there is an improvement plan as well. It's very similar to the very first one that I showed you. Again, you have to create long-term goal, short-term goal activities. And then indicator 12, transition from part C to part B. There is a similar improvement plan, but it has a few extra things that are on it that is related to that early childhood component, which is something that our consultant can kind of help you walk through. And so just wanted to draw your attention that they did change up the formatting just a little bit on some of the plans. So hopefully that's a little bit easier as we start to do some of this work this year. So some new changes to the improvement plan forms. In addition to what I've already said, when it comes to disproportionality improvement plans, a treasurer's signature is now required on that improvement plan. It was not required before. And so that is something that if you have identification or placement disproportionality and you have an improvement plan that you are going to have to create with us and sign off on, you will need to make sure now that you have your district treasurer sign that form. And so I know treasurers are not always in the district full time. So that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind as well when it comes to planning. And sometimes treasurers are not very sure about this whole process. So you might want to talk with them a little bit more in depth about the special education profile and the redirection of the funding. And also there are financial contacts in your profile, Mark Linsky, that you can reach out to at the state if there's additional questions about the redirection of funding. And he will tell you everything you want to know. We just listened to him talk for a couple of hours about it recently and go very in depth. But the treasurer's signature is something new this year. Now, if your improvement plan is submitted March 31st for any indicator and the supports and monitoring team reviews it and they kick it back to you and say, hey, you missed something, or you need to go more in depth on something here, or we would like to see more information, and you have to re-upload it again and make those changes, it must be signed again by all parties that are required. So if it gets kicked back to you to revise and to change, you will need to get all those signatures again from SST, from your superintendent, from possibly your treasurer, your community school sponsor, and then you will upload it as one piece, not as just a new separate signature page or a revised page. You will submit one whole new plan again. If there's ongoing noncompliance or an inability to show evidence of improvement systemically, there will be a new action statement required that you will have to complete and fill out on your improvement plan form. So that is something that you will want to take a look at. Most of our districts and our schools have been pretty good about being able to show that they're making progress in systemic improvement. So we don't anticipate seeing a lot of that happening because a lot of people get cleared, with their non-compliance findings and things like that. But just know that there may be a new action statement if you do see that. Indicator 12, I actually want to see if Stacy might want to mention this or expand on it at all, but for your indicator 12, part C to part B transition, for that improvement plan, you must now include the signature of the part C representative. And I know that that can be kind of difficult because those part C representatives and those agencies are not always around very frequently, and sometimes they can be difficult to get a hold of. So now on your improvement plan for part C, part B, indicator 12, you must include a signature from that representative. Stacey, was there anything else that you wanted to mention about that? Because I know you added that onto the slide just recently.
Sure, thanks, Rachel. And this is just tying back to the fact that they want to make sure that the interagency agreement is occurring and that the LEA and the Part C are having communication about this process. And so that's just another layer that they are trying to put in to make sure this does occur. So again, that is new, and we wanted to draw your attention to it.
Thank you, Stacy. And I know we can direct questions your way if there's any more that come up with that. Some important tips to remember. If you cannot get into your special education profile, there are only certain people within your district who are designated as people who are able to access this data and this confidential information. So usually it's superintendent, assistant superintendent, coordinator of special education, director of pupil services, special education supervisors, things like that. You will want to make sure that the correct personnel are indicated in your OEDS app in the OHID portal. So if you feel like there is something that you should be able to get into and see, you are a special education coordinator, you're a supervisor, you are in some type of administrative role that is going to have a part in this process, you may want to talk to people in your district to determine whether or not you need to be added in OEDS to be able to see your special education profile. But it is limited to only certain administrators within the district or the school. Like I said, your manual is your best friend. Outside of SST, of course, but your manual tells you step by step what you need to do for each of those profile indicator actions for non-compliance, where to upload everything and how to do it. We are obviously able to provide some of that technical assistance as well, and we have some some people in some places that we will work very closely with. But we also steer a lot of people when they have questions to your profile to look at what's listed in there or to the manual itself. When it comes to uploading documents in the secure upload document site, your proof that you submitted documents is the submission receipt email that you will be receiving. The monitors cannot field all of these emails from people saying, hey, did you get my records? I submitted, information through the secure upload site, things like that, because there's only so many monitors in the state and there's 610 or 11 school districts. So we want to make sure that you keep your submission receipt that you will be emailed to have your proof. It'll have information on it that should they not be able to find things later on in the system, they will reach out to you and you'll be able to give them like your confirmation information that was emailed to you. Again, I can't say this enough. March 31st, put it in your calendar, put it on your phone, put it on your paper calendar, send out, an invite to your whole team like I did, putting it on their calendars. March 31st is the deadline for the SRSR and the improvement plan. Now getting into how can SST8 help you and who are your points of contact here at State Support Team. And so just wanted to let you guys know that there are some changes this year because we have about 37 school districts or community schools that have findings this year because of that indicator 1 and 2 being added in, which is a significant number compared to what we've had in the past. And so we've had to kind of change things up ourselves here at SST a little bit as to who's helping out with what. So things to remember. SST8 must be involved in your SRSR when you are putting it together if you have a finding of graduation, indicator 1, dropout, indicator 2, alternate assessment, transition, if you have non-compliant records, and disproportionality. We must be involved in those conversations with your team. A lot of times we do it via Zoom meetings. Sometimes we have meetings in person, but we must be involved in helping you go through your SRSR. We expect that your team will already have drafted some answers to those questions and gathered some of that data once you bring us in, and we can kind of help clarify, answer some questions, make sure that you have the right information in that SRSR. But if we come to a meeting and your SRSR is blank, we're starting from scratch and there's a lot of questions on those documents. So just know that we have a lot of districts we're working with, and so plan accordingly. Try to draft answers to those questions as best as you can ahead of time. SST8 can be involved if you need support for your SRSR, if it's about timely initial evaluations or Part C to Part B transition. A reminder, all improvement plans across every indicator must be reviewed and signed off by your SST8 consultant before it is submitted to the state. If you do not have a signature from us, it will be kicked back to you. And so that is not something that you want to play with. So make sure that you have your indicator plan signed by us before you submit it. And I would appreciate, I'm sure all of our consultants would appreciate that you plan accordingly time-wise. Because like I said, last year, I was feeling emails at 8, 9 o'clock at night, the night before it was due. And so I was trying to do all that at home, and it's not always very easy. Now, I'm going to let Janine talk a little bit about the next couple of slides, but I'm going to kind of front load a little bit because indicators 1 and 2 is brand new to phase 1 of the release of the special education profile. We are going to be holding a support session for those LEAs and community schools that have an indicator 1 and 2 finding on January 23rd virtually from 9 a.m. to noon. And that is where we are going to go in depth about indicators 1 and 2. And we are going to make sure that we go through the SRSR and the improvement plan, the questions. We're going to kind of tell you what we recommend in terms of what data you might want to pull and gather, what information you might want to explain on some of those questions, because this is brand new to you and this is brand new to us as well. So we have put in place the support session for indicators 1 and 2 on January 23rd. you can click on your screen to register. You can also go to our beautiful new website that our communications team just put together, which is wonderful. It is very reader friendly. It's much easier to navigate. They did a great job. So if you haven't been to our website lately, you can go onto our website and our events calendar and click on January 23rd, and you'll see that session that you can register for. And so our website is SST8.org. It's very, very easy. But like we said, and it says on this slide right here, all LEAs and community schools with a finding in 1 and 2 are required to participate in the support session. Now, I'm going to let Janine talk a little bit about this because indicators 1 and 2, like I said, we have about 17 or 18 school districts and community schools, in addition to all of the other findings and indicators that need support or will need some type of technical assistance or somebody from SST to answer some questions. So we do provide that differentiated support because we do have a certain model that we have to follow from the state of how we support different districts, depending on whether or not we have service delivery agreements with you or you are a priority school, that sort of thing. So Janine, I'm going to let you kind of explain this one a little bit.
I don't know, you kind of covered it. Yeah, so indicators 1 and 2, graduation and dropout. If you've been looking in your profile for years, you've probably had, you've seen if you've not been meeting that requirement for years. What is new is that there is required action. And that came about really quickly because the state is very concerned about our low graduation rate for students with disabilities, and they want to leverage this opportunity, which we can understand. We've got a lot of districts and community schools with this finding, some of whom I think because of some of their other areas of focus and interest, this will just sort of fold into that. Some of whom are really new to completing this kind of indicator work. And so what we're going to do is offer this session. And Jessica, I see your question. I'll get to it in just a minute. This is a session we are offering for all SST8 districts. To just kind of level set, get everybody on the same page about how to complete the SRSR, not just from the perspective of the form, which Rachel's really already covered here, but from the perspective of what are the kinds of things that this self-review summary report is asking you to reflect on, because they're new areas of reflection that we've not really grappled with before. So we're asking everyone to participate in that. We're kind of referring to that as a tier 1 support. Now, to Jessica's question, this is just how Region 8 is handling it. So if you would like to come to our session and you are not in Region 8, you are welcome to come to that session. This is not a statewide approach. That's just how SST8 is doing this to kind of maintain our existing service delivery model. But what we're also going to do is in the districts that we already have service delivery agreements with, and if you don't know what that is, you don't have one. So don't worry about it. But the districts with whom we have very close partnership and service delivery agreements, as well as priority community schools, again, in keeping with the model that we've been given by the state, we're going to work one-on-one with those folks to help them really move through this process. We still encourage them to come to that overall session because they will be that much further ahead before we do that facilitation, but we are going to work with them together on that. So this is where we wanted to make sure everybody was really clear on whether they had an indicator 1 or 2 finding, because you need to know whether you need to register for that session or not. So that's how we're handling indicators 1 and 2. And in just a second, Rachel's going to advance the slides and show who is in touch with what different indicators, who are your points of contact. But if you are one of the LEAs that is going to be receiving one of the LEAs that has indicators 1 and 2, every single one of you will have a point of contact. For some of you, it'll just be, this is the person you can ask your questions to. And for some of you, it will be, this is the person who will be scheduling that session with you. And again, this is in the spirit of equity. We cannot do everything equally. We kind of have to differentiate our support based on the model that we have. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes, no, I thank you so much for mentioning all that, Janine. And I did see some questions pop up in the chat about that. Because as of right now, we have determined as SST8 consultants, we wanted to support our region a little bit more with indicators 1 and 2, because there's not going to be much information coming from the state on it. As of now, we have not heard of any sessions that they're going to be holding about indicators 1 and 2 and how to do your SRSR and your improvement plan. So we decided that we as a team, because this is so new for so many people, we really wanted to hone in on supporting indicators 1 and 2 and helping those districts that have never done this before to go through that SRSR and that improvement plan and kind of clarify what they're looking for and what it needs to be filled out. Now, who should you contact at SST8? So like Janine said, there's 6 of us that are going to be helping with indicators this season. We call it an indicator season because it happens, for several months, but it has changed up a little bit. So who you might have worked with in the past for an indicator might be different this year, because like Janine said, we have so many findings this year because of graduation and dropout being added in. So we've had to kind of realign and rearrange some of who's doing what. So on your screen, you have the name of the consultant, you have their email address, and then you have listed out who's doing graduation and dropout, alternate assessment, disproportionality, the Part C to Part B transition, early childhood, timely initial evaluations and transition, and dispro placement. So this is a very important slide of who is going to be your technical assistance contact, somebody you can reach out to with the question, say, hey, I'm filling out my SRSR, and on question, 5A, I'm not quite sure this is what we put. Does that sound all right? Or am I on the right track with that one question? Or I'm struggling with filling out this long-term goal on the improvement plan. Can you give me some ideas? These are the people that you are going to want to be touching base with and provide in asking for some technical assistance if you find yourself in a bind. I'm not going to go through every single thing here because we do have some slides that also get into all of this more specifically. So Helen Brophy is going to be working on graduation and dropout and alternate assessment. She has some dates already listed on here of what she has available blocked out in her calendar. We have all done the same thing. We have blocked out dates and times on our calendars to help provide support for the SRSR and the improvement plan. And so you will see on each slide moving forward for each person that those are dates we already have blocked out on our calendars to support you. I'm sure there's people already emailing and saying, hey, Rachel, can I get 1 o'clock on, this day because I saw your slide. So that happens every year. So I anticipate seeing some emails coming in sooner rather than later. Next one, Dee Dee Howes is going to be working on transition and timely initial evaluations. Her availability is listed on her slide here. The next one, Stacy Smith, handles all of our early childhood transition. So indicator 12, she's going to be your point of contact, and she has her dates listed on here as well. My contact is on here. I'm going to be handling graduation and dropout as well as dispro in the area of placement. And then my dates and times are here. Janine is going to be working on graduation and dropout as well. Her dates and times are listed on this slide too. The reason we have so many people working on graduation and dropout, Janine, myself, and Helen, is because there are so many districts and community schools that have that finding. So we are kind of dividing and conquering. And so we will also be reaching out to you to let you know, hey, Rachel's going to be working with this specific school. Janine's going to be working with this specific school as a point of contact for technical assistance, that sort of thing. Tracy is going to be working on disproportionality. So she will be doing indicators 9 and 10, and she has her availability listed here, Tracy Mail. So she's going to be kind of doing disproportionality for this year. And so she can field some questions. And then, of course, we'll be working with Tracy as well, myself and Janine, because we did Dispro last year. So, but Tracy's going to be your point of contact for anything indicator 9 and 10. Again, save the date for January 17th next week from 12 to 1:30. We will have that informal Q&A. It's very informal. It's just a Zoom meeting where we will be there as consultants answering any specific questions that you have. Of course, you can email us and give us a call if you need to, if you can't make it to that session. That session you can pop in and out. I know there's lots going on during the school day, but we wanted to make sure that we offered some type of Q&A if you wanted to show up and ask some specific questions about the profile or indicators or the forms or anything like that. So just wanted to mention, we always put our IDEA disclaimer notice, and then just noting that, you know, without continual growth and progress, words such as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning. This is a really difficult process sometimes for some people, especially if you're new to it, because there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of due dates, you have to pull your team together and answer a lot of tough questions sometimes. But, you know, what we want to see is continuous improvement for our students so that we have better outcomes for our students with special needs and who are neurodiverse. So we just want to say we're here as a great support system for you. The manual is a great support system. Reaching out to the state, especially if you have technical questions such as about like the fiscal redirection and funding and things like that, that is something that would be something you would want to reach out to the state about. Some of us here at SST don't know all the ins and outs about the fiscal redirection. We can answer some questions, but really the state is the best when it comes to a lot of like the financial pieces. And so now I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm just going to see if there's any questions, general questions for our team. This would be, we have a lot of people on the Zoom right now, so we're not taking any specific questions about your specific profile or anything about your specific district. But if you have like a general type of question that would be beneficial maybe for others to hear, that would be really helpful at this point. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. And if there's anybody else on my team who wants to maybe share anything, they are more than welcome. Janine, not sure if you have any final thoughts on anything. I know we ended a little bit early. I was trying to keep us on time. Yay. 10:12, I made it. So
Great.
not sure if there's anybody else.
No, I don't have anything else to add. Again, we are going to have that Q&A on the 17th, and we would encourage people with specific questions about their specific findings to save those for that time. Does anyone have any other general questions? Actually, I just saw one pop up from Emery.
Me too.
Is there any connection with Indicator 1 graduation and the required actions to the new graduation requirements going into effect for future classes? I'm going to let Helen speak to that. I have a thought, but those who know me know that Dispro is my wheelhouse, and I am really outside of my comfort zone right now. I'm in a learning year. Helen, can you chime in on that?
Yeah, quite honestly, basically the overall questions are going to be talking about not necessarily new graduation requirements, how you're looking at graduation for students with disabilities in general. Like Janine said, this was thrown at us too, and the state is not giving us a webinar or anything. And I'm just going to be honest. We thought we were getting one. Sorry, it's recorded and I'm saying it, but
He's on the record.
I'm on the record. We have people that are joining us on Thursday this week for it's a Northeast Ohio community of practice, and we're talking about graduation and the new graduation components and how it's really going to be regional people, not us so much, talking about how they are handling graduation in their districts. So you could get some information from that, but basically it's graduation in general. I mean, yeah, we'll probably go into or discuss with you a little bit about graduation and the new requirements, but I think basically we're looking at like early morning signs, attendance, what are things that you should be looking at as a pattern for kids that are credit deficient
Norton City Schools, Denny.
Yeah.
Hello. So my question, and Helen, forgive me because you and I talked the other day, and you might have already said this, and I apologize if I'm asking a question you already answered. But
That's okay.
when it's asking you to send like student records for like your investigation, the first bullet point says current IEP. Do they want the most current IEP or the one that is in question of the error?
Well, they want that. If you're gonna send a say the data error, you're going to say that it was a data error, and you have to kind of show a snapshot of what that data error was, which was a drop-down box. But I
Okay.
think what you will do the most current IEP, because if by some odd chance they're opening up that IEP, they're going to look at your transition section. And when
Okay.
we kind of talked, that transition section may be more in depth on the new IEP. So I would send the new IEP. You'll have to discuss, or when the data error, you'll have to show, that it was a drop-down box. That's all it was. It was
Okay.
missed. And you only had one student.
Yeah, we're very fortunate with that.
Yeah, so it's not like it's systemic.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would just generalize that to all of the other findings as well. If you're uploading records, unless you need to show the cover page of an IEP or something to prove a date. Other than that, the reason that you have to submit the current one, even if that's not the one when the finding happened, is because they're going to review it for compliance. And they're going to want to know if you need to make changes. It's a viable current record that can be changed. You can't go back in time and change the old record. So that's the reason that it's a little bit out of sync with when the action or when the finding was actually identified. Great question.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat right now, Janine, but I know several people have registered already for January 17th. For next week for our virtual Q&A. I know you guys have been adding things into the chat box, such as the bit.ly and the registration links and things like that for the January 17th and January 23rd sessions that we have. And we will also, after forum, like usual, we send out the bit.ly. We have already updated the slides on that January 13th due date. We will send out the recording, that sort of thing, because we have several people who are not able to be here today because of other meetings, but we want to make sure that you get all of that information. And again, if you are on this Zoom, please make sure you rename yourself. There's some people that only have first names on here, and we have about 50 people and we had about 70 register. So if you could just make sure you rename yourself, we want to make sure you get your contact hour credit and we show that you were in attendance here as well. So please make sure to rename yourself. All you do is go up to the little box in the corner of where your picture is and click the three little dots and it should say rename. So please make sure that you have your first and last name so that we can ensure that you get your contact hours. Anything else from anybody on our SST8 team or any burning questions? I know that was a lot of information that we threw at you all of a sudden. It's a lot, but we wanted to make sure that we got it out to you as quick as possible since the special education profile just came out just a few days ago, really. And we wanted to make sure that you were able to get some info from us and hear about some of the changes and some of the updates. So not sure if there's anybody else. I'm not seeing anybody unmute. Not seeing anything else in the chat. I'm going to give it a little bit of wait time.
And while you do that, I just want to thank everybody, just as Rachel mentioned with the recent release of the special ed profile, many of us know the date that it typically comes. And so we were all like waiting with bated breath, and then it didn't, and then it didn't, and it didn't. And I appreciated just everybody kind of keeping calm and knowing it was going to come eventually. I wish I could have just told everybody January 5th, don't worry about it. Have a nice winter break, but we truly did not know. It was kind of like, we hope, we think, maybe, we're not sure. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. We had a handful of people reach out and ask individually, but in general, everyone was kind of like, we'll get it when we get it. And I think that's, you know, that's the way we have to handle that. But I do know on ODEs, and they've had a lot of changes in personnel, as well as kind of the way the system works on the back end that we can't see. And so those were some of the issues that were impacting the release. So there, I gave some talk to give some time for additional questions, and we're not seeing any. So maybe we could give people back a few minutes.
I think so, Janine. I think we're ready to stop the recording, and we're ready to go ahead and let people go. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go ahead and feel free to reach out to us.